Welcome to the Building Spirit-Filled Homes podcast by Red Mountain Community Church. This podcast exists to help us engage with a variety of topics through a biblical lens. It is our prayer that we'll take all that we learn from these conversations and apply them to our lives so that we can make a kingdom impact on those around us, starting in our home. Thanks for joining us for our conversation today. Well, welcome back to another Building Spirit-Filled Homes. Today we have Majo, and we're going to be talking about Sabbath and how we actually practice that. It's one of those things we all know about, but it's probably one of the things we engage in the least in our fast-paced culture where we never have enough time. So it makes perfect sense that God would give us a command to rest. So thanks for joining us.
So
you're back again.
Yes.
New practice. Things are exciting and going well. And so when we talked about this earlier, this idea of Sabbath, obviously it's all throughout the Bible, and it's a command of God. And we had talked about how do we engage better in this concept of Sabbath? Because I think for some people, it's like, it makes sense, like, oh, I should rest. But like, what is that? Like, how do I do that? How do I practice that? Am I doing it right? So maybe we should start there.
Yeah, I know. There tends to be, I think, a lot of questions surrounding Sabbath. And one of the places I like to start is like, okay, what is actually like Sabbath? Right? Because a lot of people is like resting and they go into like, well, that means doing nothing. Right? And it's like, whether that could be boring or just like, what am I doing? So what is Sabbath? And I love how like Jesus came to redefine that. And I'm pretty sure it's in Mark where he says like, Sabbath is for man, not man for Sabbath, right? It was created for man. So if we see Sabbath as a gift, not a burden and a list of like activities, tasks that we have to do, that could be a better approach into like, oh, then if it's a gift, like, what does that mean? Right? It means like, you delight in it, right? It's something to look forward to. Like when it's your birthday, Christmas, and you get a gift, there's this excitement.
Absolutely.
About like being able to see what the gift is. So
even that shift, that paradigm shift of like, we can have a tendency to look at it. It's like, oh, it's this command I just feel like I'm failing in all the time. And what you're saying is we're actually just kind of, we're actually looking at it wrong. Like it's a gift for us. I love that idea. It's set apart, and God wants it to be a blessing, not a punishment. And so even like seeing that as, oh, Sabbath is actually a blessing, not a punishment, is even just maybe the first place to start.
Yes. So I think that's a good place to start. And then even asking yourself the question, like, when was the last time you rested without feeling guilt or without any distractions? Because I think even society, there's this message that we have to be accomplishing something. And resting kind of communicates that opposite message, right? Of like, no, you actually like, you stop. So even asking that question, when was the last time you rested without feeling guilt?
I like that. Which is, because I know even when I try to go on vacation or take a day, it takes me like days to kind of like speak that truth over myself of like, or I need my wife to say, no, it's okay for you to rest. Because we are so kind of programmed by culture. If like we're not producing, like we're failing. And it's like, which would make sense that God would give us a command because we want to be, we've believed the lie that we always have to be producing. And the Lord's like, no, like, and to rest in Him, and to remember that He's actually the provider.
I was actually trying to remember who said this, but I like was listening to this podcast about Sabbath a few years ago, and this person was like, when I think of Sabbath is relaxing into God's goodness. And I was like, oh wow, I had never heard that, but it's so true. Right? It's a different way of viewing it, and it's probably hard because it goes against you're going against the current. So when it comes to Sabbath, knowing it's a gift, not a burden, right? Not a list of activities. And then knowing that at first is going to be hard because we're so used to producing. We're so used to like the hustle culture.
Sure.
Right? Just keep going, keep doing. That's where the worth comes from, your value.
Yeah.
So stopping can definitely trigger some things. So lots of grace. Also,
Sure.
if you haven't ever practiced Sabbath, like lots of grace. Because also there's so many benefits for mental health. Like it's tied into it.
Sure. Especially in an overly anxious culture,
Yes.
it's like, well, maybe it's because we're not resting.
Yeah.
In the Lord.
Absolutely.
Even though we know it, and I love how you say, give yourself grace, because it's not, it feels unnatural in our culture. Even though it is a natural thing God gave us, we have to actually believe, kind of like believe the truth.
Yeah, it's like ingrained in creation.
Yeah.
And there was actually, I think it was like the French Revolution. They try to change the weeks from 7 to 10 days to like increase productivity.
Oh gosh.
And actually what ended up happening is like, there was like, more rates, like higher rates of like depression and anxiety, and just people were not functioning. So they went back to 7 days a week. So even like with that, it's kind of, okay, science is also proving that like we need rest.
Yeah.
Right? You can't produce the same way, like 7 days in a row, and then expect to also function mentally, emotionally, even like physically. Right? So one of the things that I see in practice in Sabbath is like when it comes to mental health, it helps you activate the rest and digest system because you actually like slow down.
Okay.
Right? So that could help kind of like reset your system. So it goes from like the sympathetic, which is more like the stress, to the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest.
Wow.
So that can help reduce anxiety, feelings of overwhelmed. So I feel like just with that, I'm like, okay, why wouldn't we try?
If somebody's feeling anxious a lot, that could be the first question they ask is like, when was the last time you Sabbathed?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah. And also viewing like Sabbath is intentional rest. It's not just, okay, then I can't do anything.
Sure.
Right? The moment that it feels restrictive, you know that you've like gone into more like the legalistic side of like, I have to do all these things.
Yeah.
Because it's not supposed to be restrictive. It's supposed to be enjoyable and refreshing, kind of like recharging.
Yeah.
So anything that is life-giving.
It's kind of like, just again reframing it as, it's really kind of a celebration, right? Because God says to keep it holy, set apart.
Yeah.
And you stop your ordinary work. So it's like, hey, it's not that you can't do anything.
Yes.
Like you just need to sit on the couch and like be restful. It's this, no, celebrate. Remember what God has done for you. Celebrate the things He's given you. Go for a walk, listen to the bird, where normal in your everyday work day, you'd always be thinking about produce. Yes. What's the next thing I got to do? Where it's just like, almost just like Sabbath is like, take a breath and just take in what God has provided for you.
Yeah. And even just like during the week, I feel like whenever you say meditation, a lot of people are like, oh, so then meditation, like I just have to like sit and like, think about who knows what.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we all know how to meditate because during the week, you're actually thinking of something multiple times a day.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, we call it rumination, but rumination is meditation in itself. So then when it comes to like practicing Sabbath, you're also called to like, okay, you know what? Meditate, what you were saying, like on what God has done, on His word, right? Which then that's actually going to help decrease rumination, right? Because you're practicing mindfulness, right? There's also the area where you can like practice gratitude or looking at your week and being like, okay, what were some of the wins today?
Yeah.
Again, it helps you to slow down. So you're actually meditating, but you're shifting the focus of your meditation, right? Which aligns more into, okay, what does God has to say about this? Who is God? Who does God say I am?
Yeah. And you can't do that if you're just go. You don't even have space to think about, how was God involved in this? What has He already done? Oh yeah, we're coming into a challenging week, but hey, let's stop and remember, oh wait, God has taken us through that and that, and look how He's provided. But if you're, like you said, go, how could you be mindful sitting in the corner and just
Yeah.
that's not going to fix it.
Yeah. So it's really just creating the space to do that.
So do you think, is it one of those things where we need to create a space, like from a practical standpoint? Do we need a space in our home, right? Because we're talking about building spirit-filled homes. So how we do this as a family, how we model it together. Do we need to have a room, or should we have a time? Or like, what are maybe some practical steps of like practicing Sabbath?
So I feel like this is more so kind of like what I usually suggest is like Sabbath is a place to get just very creative with what you have.
Okay.
But also if we're going to look at Jesus, like he was always surrounded with his friends, right? There was a meal. So it's just kind of like, you know what? Maybe that's the way that you start, right? If you have, little ones, like, okay, maybe start, instead of doing like late dinner, do like an early dinner, right? And make it like a fun meal. Something that feels, again, that it's like life-giving. Everyone is involved in it. Maybe play some games that day. Try to reduce, and I feel like this is, again, just instead of going through all the rules, right? And like restrictive, it's just like, hey, just try to reduce distractions. Okay. No work emails, like, because it's even like thinking about work, right? It's not even just like the not working, but what are you thinking about during that time?
Which in our culture, like the technology, our work is, so much of it is mental. So it is kind of like, hey, everybody put their phones kind of in the basket, or like turn them off for, the day.
Yeah. And what I do actually because I've been practicing Sabbath now for 4 years.
Okay.
For 4 years. And it's been a game changer. And what I started doing is my phone goes on, like I changed it to grayscale.
Okay.
So it's not really appealing to go on social media. Like I'm not going to go on Instagram and look at like black and white posts. Like that's just, it's not that appealing. So even when I pick it up and I see that it's grayscale, it's that reminder of like, oh, that's right. Like it's okay for today. I don't engage in this, right? It's okay for today. I don't check Instagram.
So you're even giving yourself kind of like visual cues, or kind of changing it, the narrative or whatever. So there's a prompt of like, oh, that's right. This isn't.
And we need that. I feel like we need to remember, right? We need that extra, just, I think, even encouragement as to like, oh no, like this is what today means. So that's why getting as creative as possible, and always starting where you are, not where you think you should be, right? Yes, Sabbath, we see it's like 24 hours. But if that's not something that right now, people feel like you're capable of doing, or even just like shifting that mindset feels too overwhelming, okay, then just start where you are. And that could be, for the first 5 hours, whether that's Saturday or Sunday. Or maybe it's another day of the week, right? Because you work on the weekends. It might be Friday. Right? So maybe for 5 hours, like leave your phone in your room and then go do something else. And do something that feels like it's life-giving. Spend some time with Jesus. Go on a walk. Go hang out with a friend. And again, getting creative. With my husband, we always say, like, we do things that are life-giving, and that includes friends that we're hanging out with, people that we're hanging out with. Right? Just knowing, like, okay, what feels during this moment that it's going to be, I'm going to delight in.
Because it's like you said, when we read the Bible, Jesus was with people on the Sabbath. He actually healed. He actually gave life on the Sabbath, which went against kind of the culture, because they looked at it as restrictive versus as a gift. And Jesus, brought a better understanding of that to us.
And I think you just mentioned something. And again, this is kind of like I love seeing that Jesus healed on Sabbath, because I'm just like, okay, what were you trying to tell us there? Right? Sabbath in itself can be so healing. Right? So that's why I'm like, okay, it's not supposed to be restrictive. It's not supposed to be this set of rules and feeling guilty if I don't do certain things, but it's just more so about like, hey, there's something healing about this day because it was created as a gift for you. Right? You have anxiety? Okay, ask yourself, when was the last time that you rested without feeling guilt? Right? You're feeling depressed? Okay, when was the last time that you actually like whether it's like reached out even to like one person,
Sure.
right, that you can actually be
Yeah.
in communion with.
Yeah. I think it's so important too that throughout this, you've just used the idea of grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grace is starting where you are.
Yes.
Grace is don't overthink it. You
Yeah.
know, take a step. Hey, grace is saying, hey, if Sunday isn't your day because your work schedule is set up different, pick another day.
Yeah.
You know, so it's again not overthinking the restrictiveness of it, but as we step into it, as it's a gift set apart by God for us to bring healing, both mentally, physically, is really, it's like kind of like, why wouldn't we do it? And it makes sense that probably Satan would make us so busy that we think we don't need it. But like you said in that one, when they try to do the 10-day week instead of a 7, it was like, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
Like productivity is not God's goal for us.
No. And there's been multiple studies that the more hours people work, productivity doesn't increase. Actually, it decreases.
Interesting.
Right? So that just goes to show like we were meant for rest. Awesome. And again, it's intentional rest. I feel like that's the part that I'm always like, you don't have to just like sit and do nothing. Although if that's what you need that day, go ahead and do it.
And I think what you just said there is important. We have to be intentional about it. Like we can't just assume Sabbath is going to happen. Like anything, we have to engage in it. And as a family, make a plan. Like, hey, we can't just say, oh, we're going to do Sabbath and then schedule a bunch of things on that day. There's going to be probably some times where we're going to have to give some things up that are good things, but say, hey, if we really want to experience the gift that God wants to give us, we're going to have to give some things up. And that's okay, because the blessing that comes from it is even bigger.
Yeah. And I think even just knowing, again, if you're producing, right, a lot of times that's where identity comes from. So in Sabbath, like that's also going to probably, trigger some things, but it also opens up that space of like, hey, your identity just comes because you exist. Right? Comes because you're alive and you're loved by God.
Absolutely.
Right. So again, I think there's a lot of room for healing.
Absolutely.
When it comes to practicing Sabbath.
Well, awesome. You just opened up a whole nother podcast there with the whole identity piece. But again, we could do that on another time. But you got my wheels spinning now, because it's like, even Sabbath is connected to our identity and how we see ourselves. But for this one, what's like one final takeaway that you would say? You've given us already probably 12 great things of where we can start and how we can perceive it differently and rightly, biblically and just mentally. But what's one thing maybe a place to start again as people are finishing this podcast? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say start the conversation within your family. What feels like, based on your schedule, right? Like what feels a good place to start for your family? That might be a couple hours. That might be half a day, the whole day, but start the conversation with your family and include your kids in it. I think that's so important to also be like, ask them like, hey, what would feel like fun, enjoyable for you that you don't get to do, all the other like 6 days, but start the conversation and see where that takes you.
I love again, right, as we're building Spirit-filled homes, you got to engage the whole family, right? It's not like, oh, Dad's making us do this thing again, where it's like, no, we're developing this together because God's given it to us as a gift. And so thank you so much for spending more time with us. And again, you can connect with Majo through our website and through her website. There's connections through that. So just thank you so much for being with us again. And
thank you for having me.
Thank you for the ways you've continued to partner with our church and just invite people into healing conversations. So we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
All right.